But the what we're going to cover is the ethics complaint against Blanche, that was filed. We're gonna go in this order, in fact, the ethics complaint, and then the order ordering Blanche to respond about the weaponization fund in the lawsuit. I just sent that out a few minutes ago, and I apologize. It's just been such an incredibly crazy week that I've just had to basically triage what I'm going to report on. Anyway, so then it will be that, then the Epstein Files injunction, and then finally the demand letter from Congress. Like I said, he has had a really bad week, and I couldn't be happier. Hey, Genevieve, I'm in Boulder. Where are you? Valerie, I think you mean Blanche is a no-brainer, as in he has no brain. In the Springs, okay. Well, hello from Boulder. EL in Texas? Okay, it's just exactly, the bottom of the hour right now, and so let's just give people a couple of more minutes to join, to get their documents if they want to read along at home, to grab a coffee or a tea, uh, so yeah. And yeah, I thought this was a very fitting mug for today. As those of you who have been with me for a while know, I have several of these mugs, and, I think people enjoy spotting them almost as much as they enjoy guessing what the, magic word is going to be in one of the posts. Hey, Ann Welty, where is McCall? I used to live in Priest River, and McCall sounds familiar. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Anna Welty. I really wish there were a function where you guys could actually talk. Um, but and Lori, I do not disagree with you. Blanche needs to be disbarred. A whole bunch of them need to be disbarred. North of Boise. Got it. Near LA. I actually moved to Colorado from California, although I was in the Bay Area. And not that any of you guys care, but while we're waiting, I am originally from New York City. So that was quite a journey. Avery, if you're talking about the transcripts, for example, that have been released of the testimony of, people's testimony before Congress, they answer that way because their lawyers are telling them to do that, right? I mean, so it is annoying, but it's also completely understandable. And I have zero doubt that, for example, um, was it Black who was there earlier? He's saying he had no idea what Epstein was up to, but he didn't say it in that exact way. We don't know exactly how he said it yet. We have to wait for the transcript. But, typically, if someone is saying, I don't recall, I don't remember, I don't know, those types of answers, you know, they are unimpeachable or almost unimpeachable, right? There's very little way to introduce evidence saying that someone did remember something because you can't get in their head unless you have other witnesses to them talking about it come in. So, um, do a Zoom and stream to Substack simultaneously. Jackie, is that something that can be done? Like, how would you stream a Zoom to Substack? Would you please message me and, let me know? I assume you are you if yeah. Hey, Jason, other Colorado person. Okay, let's see if we can make that work. As some of you may know, I used to have a television show. I've had several radio shows. I really love the live Q&A format. I really do, and I really miss it. So if that is something that can be done relatively easily, then yeah, okay, Jason. So Jackie, thank you for messaging me, and also though now I've connected with Jason who's done it, and he's also in Colorado. Not that that matters because it's all remote, but anyway, thank you guys. That would be pretty cool, but we're not gonna do that today. We're gonna get started now talking about, Todd Blanche's how did I even put it? It's like I'm sure first of all, while I'm looking at the exact phrase, did anyone recognize the terrible, horrible, um yeah, and Sharon, I know. So I've done several lives with Zev. They use StreamYard, which is not a service that I'm super thrilled with. And it's, so anyway, um, all right, let's get started. And did every, j- for the notes from the front members, if you haven't already, please do check your inboxes right now. I mean, don't leave, but check it because I just sent out, several minutes ago that one order that you didn't have. Um, So do that. Anyway, let's get started with Todd Blanche's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week. And, the flip side of that is for we the people, it is an absolutely fantastic week. And I really hope that if nothing else, this week that Todd Blanche has had gives you hope. If you haven't already had your hope sort of spring. I really hope this helps do it because it's a really stunning example of what we've been saying all along, which is the courts actually are holding the guardrails. Not all is lost. It can be pretty bleak sometimes, but um, actually, I just noticed there is a setting here that says questions only. Does anyone want to tell me what that does? I've only run a few lives on Substack, so despite my media background, if I flip that on, does that just mean you have to put a question mark in your message or it won't get through? Anyone know? All right, I'm going to try it. I'm just going to see what happens. Yep, that's it. Okay, what it does is it screens out the other messages so I can only see ones that have a question mark. So, um, okay, I'm not gonna do that. Uh, Valerie, I have no idea what inbox, that it went to. Whatever your email address that you signed up with, assuming that you have it going to email. If you didn't, you know what? Let me say this before we start because it's a source of great frustration for both me and for certain subscribers. In order to get my posts with the documents in your email, if you have the app installed on any device, then the app defaults you to not getting it in email. And so you have to go to your settings in the app. You do that by going to the upper right-hand corner on on the app on your device and clicking that and then going to settings. And then you go to newsletter delivery or whatever they call it now, and you have to switch it to email. So if you have not been getting my emails, and that is the way to get the documents, then that is why. So there you go. Okay. So let's get started. As I said, Todd Blanche has had really a horrible week. I almost feel a little sorry for the guy, but not really. And it started on the 24th, which was whatever day that was, Tuesday, I think. I don't know. It started on the 24th, with 101 former judges filing an ethics complaint against him with the New York State Bar. Now, some of the media has been reporting it as saying that they asked the New York State Bar to disbar him. That is not really correct. As you can see, if you have the letter, which, I sent out, because that wouldn't really be appropriate for the judges to say, disbar this guy, even though, they are all thinking it. What it actually said was, it requested that the New York State Bar review all of these horrendous acts that are so unethical and then make a determination, and that could include up to suspension and even being disbarred. Now, some people are wondering, why is it always former judges that are filing these complaints? There have been other complaints filed as well. I think there was one against Bondi in Florida. I think that one's been filed, and maybe some others. And it's always the former judges. It's the same with the amicus briefs in the lawsuits, right? You see, a certain number of former DOJ officials or former judges. And of course, the reason for that, in terms of a judge, is that sitting judges, first of all, they're absolutely not supposed to get involved in these sorts of things. It's very not only inappropriate, but often it would actually cross lines that would cause them to be censored or possibly even impeached. Also, sitting judges who are sympathetic to what I would say our cause, who are seeing what the administration is doing and really not having any of it, they know that they are in a position, to not risk being impeached or removed because they can do a whole lot sitting on the bench. And I always have said that the best way to affect change is often from within. And I don't mean like subterfuge, but these judges are a perfect example. The sitting judges, they are the one branch that is actually holding the line and stopping this administration from doing so much more than it's trying to get away with. And maybe succeeding, but it's really the judges, they are heroes. That you've heard me say that before. Judges are heroes. So anyway, these 101 judges filed this ethics complaint against Blanche with the New York State Bar, and this is definitely not nothing. This is a serious set of charges. It's a serious complaint, and the New York State Bar will absolutely, I am confident, move forward with it, with investigating. The one wrinkle, and I don't know the answer to this, is whether they have policies about sitting attorney generals, whether they have a policy that would prohibit them from investigating or certainly taking disciplinary action while he is seated, while he is still the acting attorney general. That may be a thing. I don't know. I haven't had an opportunity to research it. So if anyone knows and has, there you go. Um, you can, let us know. But that would be the one wrinkle. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is the same bar that disbarred Rudy Giuliani. So they are not afraid of taking on these tough calls. And for people who may not know, because there's no reason that you should if you're not a lawyer, basically, every state has a state bar in which you must be admitted to practice law in that state. So, for example, I'm licensed in California. I'm a member of the California Bar, and I can practice law in California. I cannot practice law in any other state, as in, when I say practice law, I mean represent people. I can give them opinions about non I can give an opinion about California law or about federal law, but I can't practice unless I actually, take their bar exam or otherwise am admitted to their bar. And one of the things about that is that you will see attorneys that are requesting the court to be admitted just for a particular case, and that's called pro hoc vice, and I forget what the Latin for that is at the moment, but it basically means for this particular case, this court in a state where you're not licensed is going to allow you to practice before the court in this case. But anyway, all of that to say that, New York State is where Todd Blanche is barred, and that is why they filed this complaint with the New York State Bar. Now, the other thing is that you don't have to be admitted, to like you're kind of automatically admitted to practice before federal courts as long as you're admitted to a state court. So, um, I had that question, and that's the answer to that. Okay. So anyway, I don't know how long it will take. They haven't, this New York State Bar hasn't issued a statement that at least the last I looked. So I don't know. I haven't seen them say that they can't move forward with it because he's sitting, he's currently employed by the feds. Uh, but I don't know the answer to that question. And I expect that we may not hear for a while just because they're probably trying to figure out what to do. But he also won't be the acting attorney general forever. And even though Trump has floated, uh, you know, um, nominating him to be the actual attorney general at this point, that's about as dead as the SAVE Act. I mean, just because of everything that's happening. So my best guess is that he will be out before he had thought. And then all bets are off. Okay. Okay, so let's move on because on that same day, the Judge Brinkema in, let me look it up really quickly. Uh, Virginia issued an order to Blanche. Okay, let's back up. I'm sure you all have now heard about what I call the pinky swear that Blanche said before Congress about the weaponization fund. So he basically said, well, we're not going to go forward with that. But he did not say and would not say conclusively that they were ending it. It's kind of like when you pinky swear with one hand, but your fingers are crossed with the other. Which one trumps? So this lawsuit was filed to stop the weaponization fund, and it's called Floyd versus the Department of Justice, and that's the one that I just sent out to you, in the past half hour. And in that lawsuit, Blanche basically said, well, this issue is moot because I said to Congress that we're not going to move forward with it. And that was his angle. That's what he has been saying all along. He has been trying to stave off the lawsuits and the investigations because he claims that his statement before Congress rendered everything moot. I said we're not going forward with the weaponization fund, so that should be the end of it, right? But he, again, refused to actually confirm and commit under oath that it would never be gone forward with, that at no point in the future were they going to go forward with it. So in this lawsuit, the Floyd versus DOJ lawsuit, Blanche tried to say, hey, judge, you know what? You don't have jurisdiction. They don't have standing because it's moot because I pinky swore to Congress that it wasn't going forward. And the judge was not having any of it. And he said, in fact, I'm going to read this to you. Again, if you're playing along at home, it is on page 3. And here's what the judge says: that the defendants, that's Blanche, have refused to accord a genuine degree of trustworthiness to their representations about the fund not going forward is particularly, I need more coffee, concerning because of the president's consistent support for the fund. And Acting Attorney General Blanche's acknowledgement that the fund remains, quote, important. And then a bit further down on the same page, the judge says, although Blanche reiterated several times during his testimony that the fund was not going forward, when asked whether he would, quote, issue a new memo in writing rescinding the fund, Blanche replied, I'm not committing to putting anything in writing. And I said it over and over again. And as the court explained during the June 12th hearing, a civil suit does not necessarily become moot when the defendants agree to stop the conduct at issue in the litigation. Under the voluntary cessation exception to the mootness doctrine, like in your face, Blanche, because I'm the judge and I obviously know way more about the law than you. Under the voluntary cessation exception to the mootness doctrine, quote, a party should not be able to evade judicial review or to defeat a judgment by temporarily altering questionable behavior. Okay, did y'all get that? So that order, opinion and order, culminated in a one-line order that Blanche had to answer the lawsuit or file another responsive pleading by Friday, July 17th. Spank number 2. All right. Grab some coffee, guys. I need some. And yes, I really thought this was the appropriate mug for this particular live stream. All right. Now, we are only on the first day of this glorious week of spanking. That was, I guess it was Wednesday. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. It was a double barrel, right? First, the former judges filed the ethics complaint with the New York State Bar, and then Judge Brinkema says, you may think it's a moo point for Joey Friends fans out there. But yeah, you may think it's a moot point, but it is not because I get to say whether it is, you don't, and you need to file documents by July 17th. Okay, let's see which one was next. All right, I need to ask your indulgence why I pulled this up because I thought I had it pulled up, but the next day was the uh, the Epstein Files injunction, which is just lovely. So give me a moment while I pull that up, please. Oh, there we go. I did have it pulled up. All right. So the next day, a different court absolutely eviscerated Blanche because of his failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, also known as the EFTA. And he used Blanche's own words to do it, which is always lovely when you can do that. So, Katie Fang, who is a journalist, filed a lawsuit against Blanche for his failures under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. In particular, she named several documents that had redacted, they were emails, and the recipient was redacted. So this is a lawsuit in part over the unnecessary, what we would think of as unnecessary redactions, right? Clearly, the whoever these were going to, these emails, they weren't victims. So therefore, it seems like the DOJ is protecting someone. And so because the Epstein Files Transparency Act very specifically says if you redact something, you have to explain why you redacted it. And instead, the DOJ is willy-nilly doing all these redactions, even in the most generous viewing of that, even if they are redactions that happened because there was just a search and replace, over enthusiastic search and replace. Even if that were the case, it still violates the act, and they never said why they were redacted. So that is, that was a very good legal strategy on the part of Katie Fang, right? To pick specific documents where she could point to redactions that clearly were not victim names and that the DOJ had never explained why those redactions happened and suing for that. The judge, now let me tell you about some of the, it's very disturbing. I looked up most of the EFTAs from the lawsuit, and a couple of them that really jumped out said, for example, let's see, I'm trying to find the okay. Ugh, I really hate even speaking these words, but I will. One of the emails from Epstein to someone that was redacted said, and I quote, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Another one to another from Epstein to a redacted person says, "Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty." There is no question that those were not going to victims and that those names should not have been redacted. So, the court issued an injunction requiring Blanche to produce all of the documents that Fang had listed, either unredacted or with a damn good explanation of why those names were redacted. And then Blanche requested a stay pending appeal, which, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed now, that's pretty much the routine. And often the court will grant that stay. A lot of people ask, like, when I say, hey, this really great order came out, but it was stayed for, a week. And they ask, well, why is it stayed for a week? And that is so that they can appeal. In this case, Judge Brinkema said the court will not issue a stay. And I'm going to read what the court said. Judge Brinkema said, "The Attorney General requests a stay of 7 days to determine whether to seek emergency appellate review. He also requests a stay of 60 days to determine whether further appellate review is warranted. The court will not issue a stay for the reasons stated in this memorandum opinion. The Attorney General has conceded that he is in violation of the act. In fact, the judge says in two different places, the Attorney General has conceded he is in violation of the act." Now, that actually kind of surprised me, other than that he was so painted into a corner that he really couldn't not concede without perjuring himself. So, again, this opinion, the notes from the front members, that is in your inbox. I don't know if you're following along now, but you certainly have it in your inbox where you can read it at your leisure if you haven't already. I, I'm almost kind of speechless at all of this. And I am very grateful to Katie Fang and Judge Brinkema, and I'm sure that they are still going to appeal it. And I'm pretty sure that they're not going to win. All right. So that was strike number 3 against Blanche, and we're still not done. The fourth one, which happened just yesterday, was that Congress, in the form of 4 Democrats, sent a demand letter. So people, the media, some media has been reporting that they sent Blanche a letter, and that is true. But that really leads people to think like, well, so what? So what? They sent him a letter, big deal. But it was actually a demand letter, and he is required to respond, and he is required to respond by a deadline. In fact, he is required to respond by July 8th. So the first half of July is going to be very busy for Todd Blanche. And in that letter, and this is such a sweet gotcha, it's talking about the weaponization fund, but it isn't talking about whether he's going to move it forward, which is future looking, right? Hey, Ellie. What they are talking about is something that already happened. They are saying that he needs to explain how the very act of creating that weaponization fund, which remember, he already did, how the very act of it did not violate the DOJ's own policies and procedures specific to how they handle settlements. Because the DOJ has policies and procedures in place to protect against exactly this kind of self dealing, double dealing. When there is a settlement, and the DOJ, of course, is often involved in settlements because they are filing lawsuits, but when there is a settlement with the DOJ, there are guardrails in place to make sure that the DOJ isn't one of the parties that is involved and therefore ends up self dealing. So this has already happened. This isn't something that Blanche can even say, "Well, it's moot because we said we're not gonna move forward with it," because he already did it. He already violated those policies and procedures, and so now this is Congress demanding, with a deadline, that he explain himself, that he explain how he thinks that did not violate these pretty clear policies and procedures. So I may have that backwards now, actually, I'm looking at notes, so let's see, did Burkina if it did, I apologize, so hang on, I'm gonna look at it right now. Burkina was the weaponization fund. Did I say it in reverse? If I did, I apologize. So, anyway, um, those are the 4 hits that Blanche took this week. It's an awful lot. He is definitely in the hot seat, and that hot seat is painted into a corner, and I could not be more delighted. And that's it. I hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend. And I'm pretty amazed that I scheduled this for a half hour and I'm bringing it in on time. Okay, bye, everybody. Oh, by the way, before I go, um, I just want to thank you guys for being followers and subscribers and members. I'm really always blown away by what we're building here, and you are the biggest part of it. So thank you. Okay, bye.